Chapter 7, Lecture 3. Continuing the theme of health and safety and food related issues, we talk about the rise of common food allergies. A food allergy is an abnormal and possibly life threatening immune system response to a specific food. So, when you take in this food and your body is allergic to that food, your entire immune system gears up to fight it off as if it is a deadly germ or a poison or something, when it's not really for other people a poison, but somehow your body feels it's that way and gears up to fight it off. And unfortunately, when your immune system gears up too much to fight it off, you yourself may be at risk of death. 90% of food allergies are attributed to 7 foods: milk and dairy, eggs, peanuts, tree nuts, those are things like cashews and almonds and so on, fish, soy, and wheat. Food allergies are more common in children than adults. They are found in boys and girls of all ethnicities, and most children outgrow food allergies. But if a child has been diagnosed as having a food allergy, they must be very careful around that food item. Food allergies have increased in the last decade, and it's not really clear why. Is it that more people are being diagnosed with food allergies, where previously mild cases would just have been thought the child's a picky eater, or they were ignored or whatever? Another hypothesis that's been examined is that the children's environment is too clean. They don't have enough challenges to their immune system from a certain level of dirt or germs or whatever, and so the immune system is just not accustomed to identifying real threats as opposed to anything else that's seen as a threat. It's just not clear at this time. Deaths and accidental injuries are also risks for children in the early childhood age group. 73% of deaths of children under the age of 5 occur in the poor rural regions of sub-Saharan Africa and South Asia due to illness and accidents. In the US, most child deaths are caused by accidental injury rather than illness. And accidents are the leading cause of death after the period of infancy and throughout childhood and adolescence. And it's a typical causes of accidents: drownings, car crashes, falls, poisoning, bike crash, not wearing a helmet, and so on. So US has passed laws requiring the use of car seats and child-proof caps on medicine bottles, and they encourage parents to store dangerous household chemicals in safe places. Socioeconomic status is the most important context that influences health. Family is also an important context that influences health, but family is embedded in the socioeconomic status of that family, and that really shapes the family's resources and responses. So, members of lower socioeconomic status groups have an increased risk of injury, illness, and death. Poor children are more likely to belong to a minority group, have chronic health problems, and lack access to adequate health care because they don't have health insurance. They are more likely to suffer vision and hearing loss and have unmet dental needs. 10% of poor children are homeless. Homelessness has increased dramatically in the United States since 1980, and especially nowadays as the economy is really bad, homelessness among children is serious. One of the fastest growing sections of the homeless population is families with children. In 2007, 23% of homeless people were members of families with children. And as you can imagine, homeless children have problems with nutrition, with health, and with depression and anxiety. Because of the problems defining homelessness, how do you define a homeless family? Many homeless families are not counted and therefore are not receiving assistance in programs. So, these unstable environments that homeless families and children live in, associated with the lack of shelter, lack of health care, and lack of food, create a greater risk of depression, death, behavior problems, and academic problems for homeless children. Children can also be at risk due to exposure to pollutants. Exposure to pollutants is a preventable cause of childhood illness and death. I mean, if you take away the exposure to the pollutant, then you lower the child's risk of illness and death related to those causes. Parental smoking is one of the biggest pollutants that children are exposed to in the US and increasingly in many countries around the world. If a child is around a parent or other adult regularly who smokes, the child has a greater risk of asthma and bronchitis. Air pollution also increases the risk of chronic respiratory diseases, and air pollution can be due to living around factories that produce a lot of polluting smoke, or living in agricultural areas where chemicals may be sprayed in the air. Pesticide poisonings most occur in young children because their bodies are also very vulnerable to pesticides. Lead poisoning, we have mentioned this before, lead poisoning can lead to irreversible neurological, cognitive, and behavioral problems. Nearly 8% of children are still identified with lead poisoning. These are mostly lower income children, and it comes to them through contaminated food. Many foods are actually, sometimes you get these media items which say that certain foods were found contaminated with lead because of the water that they were irrigated with or the soil that they grew in. Lead can come through the water, it can come through paint on old houses or on toys that have been improperly manufactured. So you can get inexpensive lead testing kits, and it's always encouraged that children's environments should be tested for lead and children should be kept free from lead. Many of you who have children or who have younger brothers and sisters may have noticed that when you go to donate their outgrown items to a thrift store, the thrift store will no longer accept toys or cribs, things intended for very young children below the age of 3. This is because thrift stores are required to certify that their products are also lead free, and they don't have the money to test every toy that comes in for lead paint, and they don't know who's bringing in what, so they just don't accept these things anymore. Now we shift away from physical development to cognitive development, and we start with Piaget's approach. Piaget called early childhood the pre-operational stage of cognitive development. The pre-operational stage means children are still very concrete in their understanding and thinking. They cannot perform logical operations. Everything has to be very concrete in the present here and now in front of them. They will come to the stage of logical operations and so on later on in middle and later childhood, adolescence, and so on. But right now in early childhood, children are pre-operational. So between the ages of 2 to 7, let's see what are the advances that children make in their cognitive development. Table 7-4 summarizes these for you. The first advance that has been described in children of this age is the rise of symbolic function. Do you recall that we talked about in the toddler phase, children started to develop symbolic representation, the ability to hold a mental picture of a reality in their heads? Now children start using the symbols in terms of being able to work with these mental representations. You see this in the rise of pretend play or describing events that happened earlier or later. The ability to use symbols that have meaning underlies our use of words, numbers, and images. So until children start developing symbolic functions, they are not yet ready for working with numbers or words or images in a more applied and useful way. The next type of cognitive advance that children make in early childhood is understanding objects in space. That is, children under the age of 3, as you can recall, would mix up the picture of an object with a real object, and they would mix up the scale of the event, of scale of an item. But that was because of the dual representational hypothesis, you cannot in your mind at the same time keep more than one mental representation. You cannot think about the picture and about the thing that is represented by the picture. In the early childhood phase, however, children advance in this ability. Their use of simple maps and models becomes easier after about age 3 or 4 because they are able to keep the dual representation in their heads.